Hi, people. This is a review of Chapter 6 of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So in Chapter 5, it was just huge, lots of action. Victor had created the creature. And Chapter 5 ends with Henry saying, hey, there's a letter that's been sitting here for a few days, and it's from your cousin, I believe. So Chapter 6 is kind of in two parts. It's basically the letter from Elizabeth and then hanging out with Henry. So the first part is the letter. My dearest cousin, you have been ill, very ill. She knows that he's been sick. And remember, he's been kind of like mentally ill, mental break with reality, like, what did I do? And it's of his own doing, but he has, been down and out. It's been months that Henry has been staying there taking care of him. And in this letter from Elizabeth, she's relating what has been happening at home back in Geneva. So it's basically a get well letter, but we find out some interesting things about the family and what's going on at home. So this chapter is all about character development. First of all, his brother, who was 7 years younger than him, his name is Ernest, and so you'd want to add that to your character map. He is now 16 and full of activity and spirit. He is desirous to be a true Swiss and enter into foreign service, but we don't want to let him go until you come back to us, and that's basically saying that to Victor. She says, my uncle is not pleased with the idea of a military career in a distant country, but Ernest never had your powers of application. He looks upon study as an odious fetter. Doing homework stinks. It's a waste of time. He's not a studious person. He loves the outdoors, very physical. So you kind of know, if you have friends like that who are just way more physical and less, I don't want to think about things. I want to do it. That would be Ernest. And then in the next paragraph, she talks about this person, Justine Moritz. And this is an important character, so if you think, oh, she's just going off on a ramble, pay more attention than that. Remember that Elizabeth had to take the place of Carolyn as the mother, so Elizabeth is mothering everybody. So she says, my trifling occupations take up my time and amuse me, but since you left, but one change has taken place in our little household. Do you remember on what occasions Justine Moritz entered our family? Probably you do not. And then, thank goodness, she says, I will relate her history. So then after this, we get 2-3 pages of who Justine Moritz is. You should start with the mother of Justine Moritz. Her mother was a widow with 4 children. Justine is the third. So Justine's parents, the mom, the dad, have child, Justine, and then the youngest child. This girl had always been the favorite of her father, but through a strange perversity, some just weird dynamic between the mother and daughter, the mother cannot endure her and is like mean. She's mean to her. After the death of the father, the mother treats her super badly. So she plays favorites with the other 3 and then treats Justine very badly. Now, Elizabeth is writing about, she says, my aunt observed this. So you have to assume that before Carolyn passed away, that Elizabeth is talking about Carolyn observing this. And when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother. So Carolyn says, hey, mean mother of Justine, please let her come live at our house. And so she says, we will treat her as a servant. And then she goes on in the next few sentences about how well servants are treated in Switzerland. And then she kind of disses some of the other countries in France and England that people treat their servants badly. So Justine, we received in our family, treating her more as a sibling, a daughter, than as she says, servanthood would not include the idea of ignorance and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. So they're treating her in a dignified way and very kindly. And so Justine obviously is going to love that environment. So my aunt conceived a great attachment for her, and then Justine picks up on her mannerisms. And so certain things that Justine will say, do, ways that she moves her head, the more time you spend around people, the more you kind of pick up their mannerisms. And so she starts to act more like Carolyn. Anyhow, she is receiving an education in service to the Frankenstein family. And Justine was, quote, the most grateful little creature in the world. And so she's just a wonderful child. It does say that Justine adored her protectress. That would be Mrs. Frankenstein, although her disposition was, and here's where she kind of gets into a little description. Her disposition was gay and in many respects inconsiderate. So what she's talking about is like, she mentions in a few more sentences, vivacious. So energetic, but some people would say bordering on disrespectful. So super energetic, that would be what she means by inconsiderate. But she paid the greatest attention to every gesture. So why are we spending all this time? Well, when my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied in their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her illness with the most anxious affection. Because what happens if Carolyn dies? What happens to Justine? So surely, one by one, Carolyn dies, then what do we do with Justine? Then it goes into the next paragraph. One by one, her brothers and sister died. Remember how it was child, Justine, child. All her siblings eventually die. And maybe it's the scarlet fever. We don't know, and that's not relevant to our story. But we know that her mother now is left childless. All her favorites are gone, but now she has Justine. And so there's a reference in here. She was a Roman Catholic. I believe her confessor confirmed the idea that the deaths of her favorites were a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality. It's like, this is your punishment for treating kids better and not treating them all the same. And so anyway, so that's the idea, is that the mother is supposed to repent for her partiality of treating the other siblings better. So she calls Justine back. The mother calls Justine back to help care for her. And Justine's like, oh no, I have to go with this lady who is really mean. And she tries to be kind, but the unkindness, she can't help it. So this is all about Justine's mother. Justine goes and takes good care of her mother while she is suffering and dying. It says the poor woman was very vacillating in her repentance. That means she's going back and forth. Like, I'm going to be so kind, but then, I don't like you. And so it's really difficult for Justine to be there. Anyway, after Madame Moritz passes away, Justine, it says, has returned to us. This is Elizabeth again. And I assure you, I love her tenderly. She is clever and gentle and pretty and wonderful. So that is the story about Justine. You're going to want to update character map and keep track, because she'll come back again in future chapters. I must also say a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. Now we know that the youngest brother of Victor, so not Ernest, who's 16, but there's another brother, William, and he is a young child. I wish you could see him. He is very tall of his age, with sweet laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. Just adorable. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. Oh, he has already had 1 or 2 little wives. Oh, it's just so sweet. But Louisa Biron is his favorite pretty little girl of 5 years of age, and we just have to kind of gauge, well, if she's 5, he's somewhere around there. And then she goes into a paragraph about gossip and kind of reconnecting him with home, and that's not necessarily really relevant. So as we go back to the end of the letter and Victor in the real time with Henry Clerval as he finishes the letter, oh, I really need to write back to her. He does write a letter. It says, "This exertion greatly fatigued me." And he says, "But my convalescence, my recovery, Henry taking care of me, has allowed me to now leave my chamber." So as he leaves his chamber and they go around doing some like buddy things, remember that Henry had come to the university to get an education, but he hasn't had one yet because he's been taking care of Victor the whole time. So one of my first duties on my recovery was to introduce Clerval to the several professors of the university. So Victor has been totally isolated, totally separated, but we get a little glimpse as Victor introduces Henry to his science teachers, kind of how they feel about him, which is really interesting. He says, he reveals in that same second paragraph there after the letter, "I had conceived a violent antipathy even to the name of natural philosophy." He can't stand the thought of or the presence of the works, the readings, the scientific materials. He says Henry saw that he would become agitated, and so he removed all the apparatus, all the chemical stuff, all the chemistry equipment, all the bottles, everything. He had also changed my apartment, for he perceived that I had acquired a dislike. Well, yeah, the room that you created this creature. When he says he changed it, I don't know if he means they moved to a different place or he just rearranged it. I don't know. I don't believe that's super relevant. But they do go visit the professors. Waldman first, it says, inflicted torture when he praised. So Victor doesn't want to be praised. He doesn't want to hear like how great he is, because he doesn't think he's great. He thinks he's horrible. He did something really, really bad, but nobody knows about it. Waldman soon perceived that I disliked this subject, so he kind of changes to the subject of science alone, but still that is not helping Victor. Then we have a funny, at the end of that, he says, "I could never persuade myself to confide to him that event which so often was so often present to my recollection." That's Victor saying, "I will never tell Waldman what I've done." Okay, he's like super ashamed. Then it talks about Crimp. Remember the guy that he thinks is so gross and despicable and unpleasant. Crimp reveals in his statement here, he's talking to Henry Clerval because they've just met. He says, "I assure you, Henry, he, Victor, has outstripped us all," which means he's better than all of us. "A youngster who but a few years ago believed in Cornelius Agrippa as firmly as in the gospel has now set himself at the head of the university." So I believe I said in the last couple chapters ago, I said Victor is so successful and so smart. He's really kind of surpassed everybody, all students and the teachers. And so he kind of is joking about how like really brilliant Victor Frankenstein is. And then they just kind of keep talking. They move on. Clerval and Victor go on, and then they're talking about Clerval's. So Mary Shelley switches into Henry wants to actually start his studies. He does. He starts studying Asian languages. Says the Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit languages engaged his attention, and I was easily induced to enter on the same studies. Way back in the beginning, when we first met Henry, it says that Henry and Victor were opposites, that Henry was moral and like all about the arts, and Victor was all about the sciences. This is just showing that Henry actually starts his education, and Victor hates the sciences so much now that he's actually willing to start learning Asian languages as a distraction to kind of get his mind off of what he's done. It says, I felt great relief in being a fellow pupil with my friend. It says, summer passed away in these occupations. My return to Geneva was fixed for the latter end of autumn, but it's delayed by several accidents. Then winter and snow arrived. The roads are impassable. My journey was retarded until the ensuing spring. So a season has gone by. So it had already been 6 months, and now it's going to be another year. So you may have a question. What happened to the creature? And we don't know. Mary Shelley doesn't get to it. And this is a lot of foreshadowing of, I don't know. Victor doesn't know, but we haven't heard one single thing. So the month of May has already commenced, and I expected the letter which would fix the date of my departure. Meanwhile, Henry proposed a pedestrian tour. That just means they're going to walk all around the area. He says we passed a fortnight in these perambulations. It's like 10 days or 2 weeks. My health and spirits had long been restored. He's getting back to himself. He doesn't have symptoms of that mental illness anymore. And instead of, he said, study had before secluded me from the intercourse of my fellow creatures and rendered me unsocial. I hadn't been going out and seeing people. But now I'm going out with Henry and everybody is great, and I'm seeing children, and I have this great love of nature. And the last little section, all that romanticism there, the happy and inanimate nature had the power of bestowing on me the most delightful sensations, serene sky, verdant fields, watch for the nature being reinvigorating. And so that's what it ends on. Chapter 6 ends, Henry rejoiced in my gaiety, and my spirits were high, and so everything is looking good at the moment. So anyway, that's the end of chapter 6, and we will see you for the next one. Bye-bye for now.